Dear friends, welcome to this week's virtual drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege to be Parshas Emor. And amongst all the beautiful mitzvahs that we have in the Parsha, the Torah tells us about the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer, counting the Omer, the mitzvah in which we are currently engaged. The Torah says, this is in Parach Chav Gimel, Pasuk Tesvav, chapter 23, verse 15, Usfartem lochem ma'acharas haShabbos. You shall begin to count, literally translated from the day after Shabbos, which we understand actually means from the second day of Pesach, from the day that you bring the carbon omer, which is a special barley offering that we bring on the second day of Pesach, and you shall count Sheva Shabbosos Tinimos. Count seven complete weeks, 49 days. And then on the 50th day, and then on that 50th day, you shall offer up a new mincha, which is a reference. Remember, the 50th day is Shavuos. The 50th day is Shavuos, and we offer up a special offering called the Shtei Alechem, 2 loaves that come from the New Year's crop of wheat. Incredible. But we also know that these days are laced with a tragic overtone, based on the events that we read in the Gemara Maseches Yevamos Daf Samech Beis and Beis 62b, where the Gemara says as follows. Famous Gemara that we're all aware of. 12,000 zugim tamidim haylo Rabbi Akiva. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students, 24,000, the future, the best and brightest of Klal Yisrael. Nigvas adan tipris, from one end of the land all the way to the other end. V'kulan meisu b'perek echot, and they all died, unfortunately, during the same time frame. And the Gemara identifies what's the time frame between Pesach and Shavuos. So what happened? What happened? These were not ordinary individuals. What occurred? The Gemara says, why did they all die during such a short amount of time? Because they did not give literally proper honor, proper respect, one to the other. And the Gemara is baffling. The Gemara is baffling because it's important to understand who we're talking about. These are the students of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the leader of the generation, and presumably he was training the leaders for the next generations. These were the best of the best. These were the Kodesh Kadashim, the holiest of the holy. And how could it be? In other words, what was the sin? What was the mistake? And much rabbinic ink has been spilled over the generations trying to understand what exactly the nature of this issue was. So there was clearly some type of interpersonal challenge that the students of Rabbi Akiva had with one another. You know, the Rebbe says that they were just solely focused on their own spiritual growth, didn't really care about the other that much. Figured Ekarav of the Jews to build up the self, don't worry about the other. Okay, other possibilities explain that maybe there was just a lack of simple niceness. Sometimes we forget just that we have an obligation to just be nice to each other, just to be good with each other. But whatever it means, there was some type of breakdown on the interpersonal level that led to the premature demise of 24,000 budding Talmidei Chachamim. There was some type of interpersonal collapse that led again to the tragic death of the future leaders of Klal Yisrael. And just to understand how profound and how traumatic this loss was, the Gemara says, after these 24,000 students died, the Gemara says, V'haya olam shamim. The world was desolate. The world was desolate. There was almost like an existential threat, like what is going to be the future of Klal Yisrael? Rabbi Akiva had tremendous strength. Rabbi Akiva had tremendous spiritual stamina. So he went on. He found 5 new Talmidim. He rebuilt. But for that moment, after the death of these 24,000, it was not clear that there was a path forward. The world, the spiritual world of the Jewish people was absolutely unequivocally desolate. And of course, we know that that's why, because of this story, Sfira is a time when we focus a bit more on our relationships. You know, throughout the year, we should be focusing on our relationships, but Sfira, really, there's a hyper-focus on Bein Adam L'Chavero. What could we do to improve our relationships with the other? Whether it's with family members, whether it's a marriage, whether it's friendship, whether it's just generally relating to people who are maybe different than ourselves. Sfira, these days, when we saw such an interpersonal collapse, these are the days when we try to work on our relationships a little bit better, to try to invest a little bit more, to identify perhaps the relationships that are frayed or broken or strained, and try to figure out how we can improve them. And there are many different strategies that we can employ to better our relationships. Obviously, again, there's not necessarily one strategy because every relationship is different. Every dynamic is different. But I want to share with you something amazing that I think we could apply to all of our life relationships, whether they're doing wonderfully or whether they're a bit strained. And if we inculcate this piece of advice during these days, when we mourn for collapsed relationships, when we mourn for the unraveling of the interpersonal contact between the future leaders of Klal Yisrael, we will be able to lift up the general level of our relationships to unprecedented heights. It's a beautiful story that's told about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So the Rebbe always had like a shamus, someone kind of like who was with him in the house, just help oversee things, help to manage the house, help to manage life. So in the story, this individual is not named. I guess it was probably a rotating position. But the Chassidim always used to ask people, ask like this Gabbai, this shamus, about the different details in the Rebbe's house. After all, again, this shamus, this Gabbai, this was the guy who got to see Me'achori HaPargos from behind the curtain, right? Everyone else saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe outside, in the base medrash, 770, in the world, the Farbrengen. But what was the Rebbe like at home? What was the Rebbe like, again, behind the curtain? So they would always pepper this Gabbai, this shamus, with a lot of different questions. And one time they asked him a fascinating question. They said, what does the Rebbe call his Rebbetzin? Let's say, I don't know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is in the kitchen, the Rebbetzin is in the living room, and he needs to call his Rebbetzin, he needs to call out to her. It's like, what does he call her? It's an interesting question. Does he call her Rebbetzin? What does he call her? Dear, how does the Rebbe refer to his Rebbetzin? And in the story, the Gabbai thought about it for a moment, and he said something amazing. He said, I don't know what the Rebbe calls the Rebbetzin, for one simple reason. I've never ever heard the Rebbe call out to the Rebbetzin. If he wants her, he goes over to her. He finds her. He finds where she is and he walks to her. He never summons the Rebbetzin to him. He always goes to her. And it is such an incredibly overwhelming story. It's a beautiful story in terms of Shalom Bayis. It's a beautiful story in terms of marriage. But I think it's also a profound lesson in all interpersonal relationships. See, sometimes what we don't realize we do in relationships is we call, so to speak, call out to people to come to us. I want a relationship, but I'm going to create the terms of the relationship, and I need you to come to me. I need you to do for me. And then when people don't come to us and people don't satisfy the needs that we've created, we become disillusioned, we become dissatisfied, we become upset, we withdraw, we give up, we throw on, whatever it might be. I think what the Rebbe was teaching us was, in life, if you want meaningful relationships, don't expect people to come to you. You go to people. Don't call out for other people to come to you. You go to people, meaning what? Don't spend your life creating expectations of others, because we create expectations, and first of all, who's to say the expectations are realistic? And who's to say the other person even knows about the expectations or agree to the expectations? Don't create expectations of others and expect them to conform, but rather, again, you go and you seek out the relationship. You want your wife, you go to her. You want your parent, you go to him. You want your kid, you go to them. You want a friend, you go to them. Stop summoning people to you. Stop creating expectations and then expecting people to go ahead and fulfill them. The Rebbe never called out to his Rebbetzin. If he wanted her, he went to her. And lesson number 2, I think, is when machlokes happens. In every relationship, even the best of relationships, there are arguments, there are disagreements, and dare I say, there may even be fights. And even in the most loving and passionate of marriages, a husband and wife could have a significant falling out. Parents and children love each other to no end, but there could be separation. And friends could be literally, again, v'nafshi kshura b'nafsho, but something happens and we push apart. And sometimes in those moments of machlokes, we know what happens. I say, okay, I'm ready to reconcile. But the other person needs to make the first step in reconciliation, because, hey, at the end of the day, I was right. They were wrong. I am the aggrieved party. So if I am the aggrieved party, then they must take the step towards me. And I'm open, and yes, I'm going to be mochel, I'm not going to be an achzer, I'm not going to be indifferent or difficult. I am willing to forgive, but I'm not taking the first step. I think what the Rebbe teaches us is that if you really want to be a person of shalom, be willing to take the first step even if you are right. Be willing to take the first step perhaps even if you are the aggrieved party. Because at the end of the day, the Sas Emes says so beautifully, the biggest difference between adults and children, the Rebbe says, is that children value being happy over being right. Adults value being right over being happy, which is why in general there's a lot more happier kids than there are adults. We have to begin to value being happy over being right. And sometimes that willingness to reconcile, even if I was right, the willingness to take the first step towards reconciliation. Don't call out to someone, go. You have a frayed relationship, but I'm not at fault, but I didn't do it. Okay, I got it. You're right. You didn't do it. But do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? I think all of us, if given the choice between being right and being happy, I want to be happy. And sometimes being happy requires me to swallow my pride a little bit, requires me to go ahead and kind of get off the pedestal of being right and figuring out, how can I just make shalom? How can I create peace? How could I go ahead and help to smooth this over? Even though I am the aggrieved party, but I'm not going to spend my life waiting for someone else, creating expectations, calling out for someone else. If I want happiness and if I want shalom, sometimes you have to create that for yourself. So what exactly was the mistake of the students of Rabbi Akiva? I don't know. And the truth is, maybe Chazal are purposely vague because it doesn't matter. In other words, that was the mistake of the students of Rabbi Akiva, that was between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So maybe it's not for us to know because it's not for us to stand in judgment. But the lesson is clear. These are days where tragedy happened because our interpersonal relationships collapsed on a large scale. And therefore, these have to be days where we once again become attentive to the quality and to the fabric of all of our relationships. And the Rebbe teaches us, don't spend your life calling out to other people to come to you. You go to them. Number one, don't create expectations of people and then expect them to fulfill them. But if you want something from someone, be willing to go to them. Instead of creating expectations and waiting for them to fulfill them, just go and engage the other. And if we have frayed relationships, if we have strained relationships, if we have difficult relationships, and we all do, sometimes it is so much better to be happy than to be right. And instead of waiting for the other to come to me to reconcile, maybe it's kedai to swallow my pride a little bit, to swallow my hurt a little bit, to take the first step forward towards reconciliation. Don't wait for the other to come to you because maybe they'll never come. But if I'm willing to go and engage, who knows what we can accomplish. And perhaps if we internalize these lessons, this beautiful lesson of the Rebbe, this two-pronged lesson of the Rebbe, then in Meretz Hashem, perhaps we could turn these days into days of reconciliation. We could turn these days into days of Avas Chinam. We can turn these days into days in which we rebuild difficult and frayed relationships, and in that way, perhaps, transform the very fabric of these days from days of mourning into days of simcha. Wishing everyone a good night of Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.